You're listening to CX Passport, the show about creating great customer experiences with a dash of travel talk. Each episode, we'll talk with our guest about great CX, travel, and just like the best journeys, explore new directions we never anticipated. I'm your host, Rick Denton. I believe the best meals are served outside and require a passport. Let's get going. It's one thing to bring great customer experience into industries where it's expected. Luxury travel experiences, fine retail. But what about spaces where it's not expected and not common? Why shouldn't a customer of a nonprofit expect a great customer experience? What about the world of debt? Today's guest, Katie Stabler, founder and director of customer experience at CULTIVATE Customer Experience by Design, is brave enough and has the drive to ensure that all get a great customer experience regardless of situation. I was introduced to Katie through a prior CX Passport guest, Sharon Boyd, episode 2, and have found Katie to hold an incredible heart for the customer and a strong drive to create a great business focused on helping companies deliver great CX. Also, you know what I say about the best meals? What if I told you Katie has had the chance to prepare her best meals on Masterchef UK? You'll hear about that today, too. I am super excited to talk with Katie today. Katie, welcome to CX Passport.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm super excited to be here.
It's going to be fantastic. This is one I'm very excited about. So your company's name and tagline intrigues me. Cultivate, Customer Experience by Design. Design is so important to CX, and I enjoy the image of really caring for the experience with the word cultivate. Tell me more about your brand and how you go about CX design.
Yeah, I mean, for me, an organization's customer experience absolutely has to be designed. It has to be intentional. It has to be purposeful. You know, you can't just throw a product or a service out there, a load of tech, a team, a bunch of processes, and just expect things to work. And likewise, the customer experience, once it has been designed and implemented, it needs to be continually nurtured and continually cultivated, which is where that word came from. Mm-hmm. Your customers change, your business change, you change. As all of this evolves, your customer experience strategy does too.
You know, it's funny how that when you're saying it, it's so obvious. And yet so many places aren't thinking about that. It's almost, hey, I've plopped in customer experience and therefore it's going to succeed going forward. So when you're thinking about how you help companies get that right, let's talk about how a company can really optimize its CX team. What are some examples of where you see it going well? And I'd love to hear some examples where it might be falling short.
Well, it's so interesting, Rick, that you use the word team there, because for me, that is often where I see one of the pitfalls. Okay. So I think so many organizations, they don't actually have a team or even a dedicated CX function. You know, customer experience is growing in popularity. It's a buzzword. Organizations are really starting to get it. But still, you know, depending on the size of the company and the resource you have, many organizations just don't have that dedicated functionality. And I think that is one of the areas in which customer experience initially is on a back foot, because customer experience is not a side of the desk initiative. Mm-hmm. I'll give you a really good tangible example of that. So when I took on my first big corporate role, I was hired with the position of both the head of customer experience and the head of quality assurance. Aha. Now that's fine. I like a challenge. It's all good. Right. And quality assurance and customer experience actually are really complementary. Mm-hmm. But if you consider that this organization was an organization with over 4,500 employees and over 700,000 new customers a year. Oh my gosh. Really, it should have had, huge. Really, it should have had a customer experience functionality as opposed to a split role. Eventually, it did. Through the tenacity of myself and the wonderful CX director I worked with, it transitioned and I became 100% CX focused there, and the CX team grew. But if you don't have that ability to dedicate some kind of resource, be it time, people, that's one of the pitfalls that customer experience strategy will instantly come foul of.
Yeah, it is. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, because but I'm sitting there reacting to what you just said there, and it's so true, right? That idea of the dedication, and maybe a little later, I may be asking you about, okay, but sometimes that can't be the case. But maybe we explore it just a little bit later. But keep going. I'm sorry for interrupting there.
No. The flip side of that is exactly that. It's the flip side. So the thing that connects companies and customer experience and where they really get it right is when they do have that dedication to customer experience. And in particular, when it's a real team endeavor. So it's not just the CX lead or the CX department. I think we hear about the dangers of operating in silos all the time.
Right.
Silos is one of those words, isn't it, where you hear it now and your eyes roll because it's the obvious excuse that we go to when there's a problem. But I genuinely believe that when it comes down to customer experience, there is no better chance of success than when customer experience isn't just the responsibility of the CX lead, but it's the responsibility of everybody in the organization. And those organizations that really support their CX lead to embed themselves within all areas of the business, support the departments to see how they impact customer experience, and equally how they can derive value from an enhanced customer experience. That is when customer experience is set up for success.
Boy, I could not agree more, because I've heard the extreme. The extreme that you just described, right, where you were talking about how there is no existence of a customer experience team or that sort of thing, and it's survivable. Actually, there's a way to survive that if it doesn't exist. But then there's the other extreme, which is, oh, the CX team, they're the ones that handle that customer stuff. We don't need to worry about it because that CX team handles it. So I'm curious, in that vein, so let's assume there's a CX team. How have you worked with companies? How have you seen companies do a really good job of making sure that the CX team is not this isolated beast that everybody perceives they handle CX, but rather they're there to help facilitate and shepherd CX throughout the entire company?
It is definitely that whole team input from every different area. I think what really gives it a foot up in a foot or a foot in the door is when senior and more executive members of the organization get it and they are promoting it and sponsoring it and supporting, maybe opening those doors where perhaps doors are tricky to open.
Right.
But also, I think it comes down to the hire. You need to make sure that your customer experience person, whether they are a lead who's taking on that functionality or whether or not it is going to be a bit of a side of the desk job, I think they have to have tenacity to knock on people's doors and show people how important customer experience is, because not everybody gets it straight away. And it is one of those roles as well where everyone thinks, it's common sense, it's easy customer experience. And it kind of is, but you still need that focus and attention on it consistently. So you do need somebody who's willing to show up at meetings, squeeze their way into agendas, and make sure that it's always a point of focus.
Boy, it is weird how things kind of happened. It is not that you knew about the other recordings or the content on some of the other recordings that haven't been released yet, but the phrase personal resilience, or that insistence on driving forward and not giving up, is now coming up as a recurring theme. And so I'm glad that you've brought that up, because there is sort of sometimes there can be a CX fatigue at places, and that, okay, we heard it was a new initiative, we got excited about it, but then once it becomes sort of the day-to-day business operating elements, there's a fatigue, and that CX leader, whether it's a formal CX or someone just responsible for driving it forward, has to have that personal resilience to keep the customer at the heart and at the center of the company. And I appreciate you bringing that insistence to this conversation.
It's so interesting that you mentioned resilience, because I totally agree. In fact, I was listening to a TED talk on resilience this morning. It had nothing to do with customer experience, but everything felt relevant. So yeah, really interesting you bring that up.
So let's pivot just a little bit, because I can't wait any longer. I've been sitting on this, but wanted to talk about it. So we talk about experiences a lot on CX, and you've had quite an experience. I didn't know this when I first met you, but I know you're a massive foodie, and you have been on Masterchef UK. Now, I will provide a link to season 12 in the show notes for anyone who wants to catch Katie's episodes. But what was that like, and how have you brought that experience into the work that you do today?
Oh, my word. It was amazing. I mean, I'll talk about this forever. I'll never stop talking about it. Anyone who will listen, I will tell you about it. It was 6 years ago now, and it's just one of those experiences which I think is unparalleled. I had no idea what it was going to be like going into, but I loved every minute of it. The competitive environment, I love being pushed. And now, to be honest, it's kind of ruined me, because I don't like cooking in the kitchen without a camera in my face anymore.
Oh, goodness.
So. No, it was just meeting new people up and down to London. It was just so much fun. People often ask me if I was nervous or scared, and just no, I loved it. So clearly I like to be center of attention, clearly.
That's awesome. Oh my goodness. Well, I can see how that really would influence kind of your approach to business going forward. It had to have been just, it's an experience that I can't really even identify with. One, not having the opportunity, but then also not having the skills to cook or anything along those lines. But it had to have shaped you. You mentioned it 6 years ago, but I'm curious, how did that shape kind of how you approach things today?
Well, looking back, yeah, it was really about pushing myself, and I am an absolute experience seeker. Anybody who knows me will know that I'm constantly after the new, the next thing. I think life is too short to just keep playing the repeat button. And as it happens, I do love to cook, which is obviously what took me in that direction.
Well, good, right?
But it's all about trying new things, being creative, and being bold and brave. And they are absolutely qualities that I advocate throughout my consultancy. So customer experience, it is about being creative. I mean, I love seeing organizations push the boundaries with the way that they communicate with customers. As a great example, not a client of mine, but a company that I've just started, that I've just become a customer of, called the Republic of Cats. Their customer, it's a cat food company, a subscription box. But their customer communication is brilliant. It's quirky, it's unexpected, and they took a risk, and for me, it works. So yeah, it's all about taking risks, about being brave, and that continual cycle of test, iterate, learn. So I guess that's where my experience of pushing myself, going into Masterchef, trying something new, doing something scary, it's what I apply to life in business.
Oh my goodness, that makes so much sense. And so I'm a little bit inspired by it as you're talking about here about risk and trying something new and being bold in that aspect. And so I know that we've talked about how you've had the opportunity to focus on customer experience in an industry not well known for its customer centricity. So talk about being bold in an area that people don't really think about CX. So I'm curious, how did you bring that? How did you bring that boldness? How did you bring that to the heart of? How did you bring the heart of the customer into that world?
Yeah, it's a really interesting mix. So I worked for one of Europe's largest credit management companies, which most people will know that as a debt collection company. And yeah, debt collection, customer experience, they're not synonymous. And for me, bringing heart was easy because it was really a matter of bringing in a true understanding of the customer and advocating that. And again, it was easy for me because I'd worked in the not-for-profit sector for about a decade, and I'd specifically supported individuals who've been experiencing financial difficulty. I started my background as a money advisor, actually going to people's homes, sitting down with them and working through the finances.
Right.
So I got to see really closely firsthand the problems that debt can create, and in some cases, just the total devastation. So there's such a stigma around debt, and nobody sets out to become a person in debt, but society just doesn't see it that way. There's a negative perception around it. So I worked with the company to not only demonstrate how beneficial an intended customer experience would be, but in that industry, how essential it is, because these customers, they didn't want to be our customers, and our actions, just the smallest of actions, could have a significant impact on their day-to-day lives, from being annoyed answering the phone to us to being petrified of opening the mail. It was so essential that we nailed customer experience, and that's what our team continually drove, is just how important it was. It was definitely not nice to have in this organization. It was crucial that we got it right. And on the flip side, I mean, it won't be surprising to you to hear that by us trusting our customers and implementing self-service functionalities that they could do themselves with their own privacy, by rethinking our communication strategy, we worked with the London School of Economics to think about how we talk to customers in debt, and be more flexible with payment options. Unsurprisingly, our customers started to trust us more, started to like us more, started to interact with us more, and eventually stopped being our customers, which is not what many people want, but in our industry, it absolutely was. We didn't want them to be our customers. So when we could support them to say goodbye, it's the greatest day.
So, Katie, little change of pace here. Join me in the first class lounge, and we will move quickly here and hopefully have some fun. What is a dream travel location from your past?
Oh, it's got to be Singapore, the most beautiful, serene city I've ever been to.
Serene. Now, I actually would like you to unpack that a little bit, because that's the first time I've heard Singapore and serene referenced together. Tell me about that, because I would love to go there. I haven't had the chance yet.
I've been to so many cities. I've never been to a city so quiet and beautiful as Singapore. We actually went just before there was about to be a Grand Prix hosted there as well.
Right.
And it was still like the traffic noise, hardly any. It was clean. It was just, I mean, it was vibrant. Don't get me wrong. It was a great place to be. But yeah, it's a city I've never experienced the likes of anywhere else. It's amazing, just beautiful.
Wow. Ooh, okay. Now, with that new description, I was already wanting to go, but now I'm really excited about it. So, what is a dream travel location that you've not been to yet?
Alaska. So with the pandemic, we were supposed to go to Alaska for my partner's 40th. The pandemic hit, it all got cancelled. But yeah, we were going to trek the national parks, do the glaciers, and that's somewhere I still love to go.
Well, I do hope that you get to go there soon. Another one that I've not been to, but oddly enough, my daughter got to go there this summer and came back with some spectacular stories and some phenomenal shots, and the beauty there is off the charts. So I do hope that you are able to get there soon. Now, this is a tricky thing to ask a foodie like you, but what is your favorite thing to eat?
It's going to be so boring, but I could live off pizza. I've got a pizza belly. I can never get full of pizza. We've got a pizza oven outside of the garden. Come rain or shine, with that. It's great.
Look, pizza is certainly one of my favorites. In fact, that is what the Denton family had last night. So it is one of ours. Nice. So on that flip side, what is a thing your parents forced you to eat but you hated as a kid?
It's kind of the other way around. They couldn't force me to eat anything, and I lived off jam sandwiches. That was it. That's all I would eat. So,
So you weren't forced into that, but that was the only category you were eating. Interesting. Okay. The jam sandwich. I like that.
The jam sandwich.
So one thing, now, we can't count the phone, right? The phone doesn't count here, but what is one travel item you will not leave home without?
Oh, it's going to be a book. I don't get enough time to read these days, so it has to be it's probably at least 3 or 4 books, as many books as I consume on holiday.
Katie, earlier when you were talking about customer experience in non-traditional areas, I know you also have spent time in the nonprofit sector. You mentioned that earlier. So I'm curious, how do you see CX similar, and how is CX different between the nonprofit and the for-profit worlds?
So when I worked in the not-for-profit sector, it wasn't in an official CX capacity. Okay. But looking back and digesting those roles, I mean, I just feel like you can't get more of an organically customer-centered organization than a not-for-profit organization, because the whole reason for their purpose, their existence, is the customer. So everything they do is focused on making sure that customer has the experience that they set out to. Interestingly, I have just stepped back into the world of not-for-profit, and one of my most recent clients was a not-for-profit. Funnily enough, back in the world of debt, so I can't get away from that, lovingly. Right. But, it was great, actually, because it shows how since, the 10 years has gone where I've worked in the not-for-profit sector, how actually they are following very much the trend of all other organizations and are very CX focused. The project I worked on was a big user design piece, and it was absolutely a priority that the customer had a good experience when using this new service. So I think they're perfectly positioned to be the strong CX leaders.
It does seem that would be a sector that certainly has the heart for the customer, right? That people go into nonprofit because they care, that there's something, that there's an issue or a topic or a problem that they're looking to solve and they care about. I do wonder, so I'm curious about this, because customer, when I've talked to folks in the nonprofit world, there's been a couple definitions of customer. One is the people that are being served by the nonprofit. But then another customer is also those that are helping to fund or that are donating to the nonprofit. Did you find that you were working with both of those worlds? It sounds like you were working certainly with the customer. What was it like when you're working also with the donor side of the house and helping them have a, for lack of a better term, a good customer experience?
Yeah, I think my experience is less on that side, although I suppose stepping into it slightly just before I moved out of the not-for-profit world. I guess it's tricky because that almost comes into that reporting side and that ROI piece.
Right.
So it's not as structured and formalized as ROI, but absolutely the funders and donors want to be able to see that what they are doing is making a difference, or making a difference in the way that they want it to or set out to. So it does come back, I suppose, into that more business side of things where you're proving the return on investment.
Boy, that's actually a really brilliant perspective, Katie. That's the first time, like, I don't know if you can see my eyes. I feel like there's light bulbs popping off all around me. That the idea of translating ROI right there, and that being the space where that ROI of CX is an important part of that. So thank you. Like, I'm sitting here going, oh, I hadn't thought of that before. So I kind of like that perspective on the donors and those that are helping fund do want to see that their gifts or whatever that might be are going to the best use possible, and using the principles that we talk about ROI of CX in play there makes a ton of sense to me. Now, I know that I've seen you post about the hard work that goes into running your own business, and trust me, I know about that all too well myself. So you've mentioned the value of having a business accountability partner. Talk to me about that.
Oh my gosh, it's so needed. I think anybody who is a solopreneur running their own business, or even working at a distance from people, having an accountability partner is just crucial. And I don't think I truly saw the value until I actually had one or started a relationship with one myself. You mentioned her earlier. She was a former guest on your show. Sharon Boyd is my customer experience accountability partner.
Very good partner to have, I would imagine.
She is indeed. She's a superstar. And it's great because we both have worked in very different areas of customer experience, so can complement each other nicely. But what is just so important is, you know yourself, you run a business, it's hard work. There's so many different elements to it. You can just very quickly get caught up in the weeds and sit staring at your computer for hours. And sometimes you just need someone to talk to about it and to plan with, and as the name suggests, hold you accountable to what you intend to do.
Yes.
So, I mean, we all know there's to-do lists that go on forever and never get ticked off. Well, the accountability partner absolutely helps that.
You have inspired me with that, both your posts and then also talking about it now, because you're right. I actually can think, as if I look to my right, I could see my to-do list and see the things that aren't ticked off, and having someone sort of call me out on it, saying, where are you with her, Rick? Where are you doing with that? Let me go back to something that you mentioned earlier. So that role that you had when you were both quality assurance and the customer experience side. I'm actually at a client, or have had a client in the recent past, where what I'm seeing is that the quality assurance or audit or compliance, that function, can be used for great influence when it comes to discerning the themes that are either broken or going well, but it also can be used as sort of an attack. And so I wonder, when you had both worlds, how did you, because I'm thinking you had both worlds and then the worlds were separated, how did you build that culture of quality assurance was used as a partner to deliver a great customer experience?
So in that organization in particular, quality assurance was really what drove a lot of the organization from a performance perspective.
Okay.
So because it was a regulated environment and it was a contact center, everything was measured through quality assurance. And it meant that the way in which the contact center staff spoke with customers was focused on a certain call procedure, which wasn't necessarily focused on good customer experience.
Right.
So what I suppose I had a unique perspective on, and a unique opportunity with, was to be able to bring customer experience into the quality assurance piece. So to make sure when we're looking at QA, it's not about, did you just say X, Y, and Z, but actually, did you make the customer feel listened to? You know, did you give the customer experience the experience that they should have had? So we enabled different CX metrics to come into the QA process, which was one of the elements we used to start to turn the organization's thoughts and feelings towards customer experience. It was a big cultural change, and that was just one of the tools that we used to support that.
I really appreciate that and want to use that because I've seen that work really well when it's a partnership. Hey, this is what we're hearing, this is what we're discovering, and making sure that quality assurance, QC, audit, whatever it is able to not just check, did you cover the regulatory requirement, but did you actually have that heart for the customer? Are you connecting with them on an empathetic level? Did you railroad the customer? Those kind of things. And it's nice to see that kind of partnership there. Well, unfortunately, I think we're coming close to the end of our time. I could talk to you for hours, but let's close out with a travel question. So you and I have talked about planned versus impulsive travel. So I know the pandemic has put challenges on both, but in a world pre, and we hope post-pandemic, tell me about how you approached planned versus impulsive travel.
I say mostly it's been planned until a couple of years ago when we decided to travel from the Florida Keys up to Boston between a mix of, long trip over 2 weeks. So it was very speedy. Mostly by car, a little bit by train and flight. And it was amazing. We had, I think, 3 hotels booked for 3 nights during that whole trip. And the rest, we just Airbnb'd it. I mean, America is amazing for Airbnbs, the value, the quality, and I mean, the booking process was just so easy that, given the tech that we had at our fingertips, it made it easy to do, and it was exciting and a whole lot of fun.
Boy, my 48-year-old self is having anxiety hearing about that kind of impulsive. I'm the one that gets the spreadsheet out and plans. Okay, so we're going to be this place in Italy, then we're going to go here, ride this train. I can't even imagine going without hotel bookings. But I do remember a day in my long ago past when I was a backpacker through Europe, and it was that same sort of, let's get on the train and go here today. All right, those kind of approaches, and I do think you get a completely unique perspective. That kind of I'm feeling I want to go check this out. So I admire you for doing that. I also am amazed all the way from the Keys to Boston.
Yeah, it was brilliant. We just wanted to fit in as much as we could, so we did.
There are people who only do the Keys or maybe the Keys to Miami, and you found, let's do the entire eastern seaboard. No disrespect to Maine, you didn't make it all the way up. But that must have been a brilliant trip. So, Katie, let me ask you this. How do people, if they want to get in touch with you, if they want to have that cultivated approach to customer experience design, how do they get in touch with you?
Best way, find me on LinkedIn. It's Katie Stabler, or you can visit my website directly, which is cultivatecustomerexperience.com.
Well, I will be sure and have those in the show notes as well. Katie, it has been wonderful talking with you. You have opened my eyes to key customer experience concepts. You've opened my eyes to maybe I need to be a little more impulsive with my travel. You've also opened my eyes to what it must have been like to be on Masterchef UK. What a brilliant experience and all of that you have brought to bear. So, Katie, thank you so much for what you've taught us today. Thank you for taking the time to speak with me here on CX Passport, and I wish you the absolute best as you go forward in your CX journey.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks for joining us this week on CX Passport. Make sure to visit our website, cxpassport.com, where you can hit subscribe so you'll never miss a show. While you're at it, you can check out the rest of the EX for CX website. If you're looking to get real about customer experience, EX for CX is available to help you increase revenue by starting to listen to your customers and create great experiences for every customer, every time. Thanks for listening to CX Passport, and be sure to tune in for our next episode. Until next time, I'm Rick Denton, and I believe the best meals are served outside and require a passport.